Okay, going live.
Perfect.
Wait, as soon as I go live, it says my camera is lost.
Wompity womp.
Oh, goodness. Gotta love technology.
Right?
All right, we are here. I think there's a little bit of a lag, so my camera might appear to vanish momentarily, but we are here. Welcome back to another live episode with Caren and I. We decided to, these don't have a title or name just yet, but
Yeah.
for now, we are wanting to honor and celebrate Black History Month by talking about various topics as it relates to Black folks in the workplace.
Yes.
And so this week we are talking specifically about being Black and introverted. I think there's been a lot of conversation around Black introverts over the past couple of years, now that many of us have been working in remote settings. And now we are running into some issues as folks are kind of transitioning back into the office or transitioning to a hybrid workplace, which isn't always ideal for everyone. So, Caren, you want to kick us off? Because I know we kind of landed on this topic of Black introverts at the end of our last live, and we were like, we have to do a full episode about this.
Yes. All right. So, yeah, it definitely, this is one that kind of struck a chord for me, um, especially being someone who is perceived as bold and vibrant and bright and loud and all of these things. And knowing that that is what I do to kind of like make others comfortable and to kind of put on that character role, so to speak. But that is not really who I am. And the expectation of that being who you are as a Black person, and especially as a Black woman, the expectation that you are bold and bright and sassy and entertaining all the time. Um, yeah, it's very exhausting, and to be able to have to put on that role all the time is just, well, kind of stressful, especially if that's not who you really are. So I was just thinking about the concept of like putting it on as a character because you know that's what's needed to fit into the environment, but
Right.
then at the same time knowing that that's not who you are. So I just wanted to talk about that and share that that's, it's not, it is not uncommon. Folks aren't alone in feeling that way, and just what that means to be a Black introvert who isn't always an introvert.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think there's a lot to be said. Well, two things I just want to highlight. Number one, taking race aside and just taking a step back and looking at the workplace, there has historically been this belief and push that extroverts are the ones that get ahead, right? The loudest voice in the room wins. The loudest voice has their ideas heard. And so extroverts have always historically been valued in the workplace more so than more introverted folks. And one could argue that it's a bit of a spectrum, right? I consider myself an ambivert personally. I feel like I lie within the middle. I'm like, yes, give me people. I want to interact. And then I'm like, okay, I'm on E. I need to go home. I don't want to talk. I don't want to smile. I don't want to put on, right? And I just need to recharge. And I just need that balance. So it is a spectrum, right? But again, historically, we have seen the loudest folks being heard, which ties into things like promotions and advancement, and people actually speaking up and advocating for their salaries and their overall compensation packages. And it also creates a huge gap within the differences when it comes to gender pay gap, racial ethnic pay gap. Those are all things that are directly tied to a person's personality and how vocal they are in some instances. The second piece that I just wanted to really quickly highlight is the fact that it is difficult for Black people in the workplace to already speak up for themselves because of us constantly fighting this internal battle of not wanting to live up to a potential stereotype or assumption that other people are making about us, right? So you factor in the mix that you might be more introverted or a full on introvert. I could just the stress, like the stress, right? You're probably not speaking up at all. People are probably constantly assuming you're okay or just don't care.
Yeah.
And that can be difficult.
Yeah. And you touch on a really good point there of just like being quiet doesn't mean you don't care. um, it's just being quiet.
Yeah.
And I think that especially as Black people, and I will drill down as especially as Black women, we don't always get the grace and space to be able to just be quiet.
Right.
We don't get the opportunity to just take in information, to just kind of sit with things. It's always considered, well, what's wrong? Are you upset? Are you mad? No, I'm literally just sitting here. I'm,
Right.
I'm just sitting, enjoy. Like I'm just taking things in.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just kind of difficult. And again, I just want to kind of get back to the performance aspect of it.
Hmm.
Um, just the feeling that especially as Black people that we are expected to perform at all times.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be tap dancing necessarily.
Right.
um, but uh, we are expected to perform. We're expected to be the life of the whatever it is, even if it is a staff meeting.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And this is a great Black introverts are a great example of why we have to constantly be talking about this idea of intersectionality. And people are often like, "What does that mean? What does that mean?" Well, you can have shared identities with people and still not have the same lived experiences or have the same other identities, right? Or same types of personalities. Neurodiversity is a thing as well, right? Some of us are introverted because we're shy. Some of us are introverted because we need more processing time to just think through things, right? And so there are different levels to what we're talking about. And I think this is just a really good example of intersectionality and understanding that there is diversity within shared identity, that
Exactly.
we often don't acknowledge. Um, and those outside of a group are not always acknowledging, maybe because they don't realize they should, or because they have grown up in very homogenous environments and only have learned that, oh, Black people can only be one way. Or, like you said, I expect Black people to be loud and boisterous and sort of the entertainers and the excited people, when in fact, sometimes a large majority of us aren't like that,
No, at all, at
Not at all.
all.
Not at all. So, the workplace, right? This whole remote shift has been very, very interesting. There have been a lot of studies where they've really looked at how the remote working environment has impacted Black employees. And one thing we've noticed is that, in general, not just Black introverts, but Black employees have expressed that and I'm not speaking for everyone, obviously, but a large majority have expressed that they've felt a lot more comfortable working remotely. There's no need to code switch. I don't have to, put on for anyone. I don't have to go through small talk. I don't have to worry about people, touching me unsolicitedly, et cetera, et cetera. Right. But then there's the added layer of introverts who have also expressed like just this deep sigh of relief, like, oh my gosh, oh, I don't have to put on, I could just do my work. And they feel more productive at home. And of course, it's difficult to meet the needs of everyone in these situations, and especially if you're moving back towards a hybrid environment. So I know you had thoughts about this, Caren, but I'll let you kind of share more.
Yeah. So I think that that's one thing that I really like about the hybrid environment is that we all have the opportunity to unmask a bit. Um, Again, and I keep going back to the concept of performance.
Hmm.
Um, when you are at home in a space that you have crafted and in a space that is created for you, you no longer feel the need to put on that show. You don't need to talk to that person at the water cooler that you really don't want to talk to. You
Right.
don't need to be bright and bubbly if you're really not feeling it. As long as you are work appropriate, you're
Yeah.
fine. You're fine. And so for folks who are neurodivergent, for folks who really don't feel like code switching, it again gives you that safety and that agency to truly be you. And I think that from a business perspective, that also
Hmm.
gives you the ability to really be more profitable. And we've seen so many articles come out that talk about the fact that folks who work from home, spend less time in their commute. And what do they do with that time that they're spending not in commuting? Working.
Yeah.
They're much more productive because they have all of the things that surround them that make them comfortable. They're more productive because they can truly be themselves at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And they're more productive because they just feel more of themselves.
Yep.
And so, like, that's especially true for those who are introverts. And for us as Black introverts, it's just great. Like, you don't have to have the camera on. You might be able to have your bonnet on because the camera's not on.
Right.
You can, maybe have a mask on or whatever it is. Like, you can do what you need to do to be comfortable and get the work done, and you're just fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I discovered earlier that the UK has a Black Introvert Week, which is pretty
What?
cool. I'll drop the link into the chat, but I saw this and I was like, wow, this is interesting. I didn't even know this was a thing, but this is a great resource. And I think, number one, this is a great call out that this is not what we're talking about is not specific to the US. I think a lot of times we talk about different topics as it relates to Black individuals, and people assume, oh, it's just US specific. In fact, it's a global thing, right? And so this is one of the few resources I've seen, and they have a toolkit where, there's like a guide for introverts, a guide for allies, tips on interviewing. I think there's tips on, your personal brand, which I have some thoughts about the whole concept of personal brand. It is given culture fit, but that's not for today's
I
discussion.
mean, that might be a future conversation.
That might be a future conversation,
right.
Because
Actually, I think that might be one where you and I might actually slightly differ about the concept of personal brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not, we'll have a conversation.
Yeah, okay.
I think I've been hearing more people bring up culture fit again. And I'm like, I thought we left culture fit behind 2-3 years ago. I was like, we have to do this again.
I thought we left culture fit with, I want to have a beer with this person. I thought that's where we left it, but apparently not.
No, we're back there again. So, but yeah, so I think this is great. There's an introvert survival guide from the founder of Black Introvert Week. His name is Richard Etienne. And it looks really cool. It's a free guide, so I would encourage people to check it out. But yeah, I think there are a lot of things that Black introverts themselves can do to advocate. Obviously, I think one of the main things that I've heard so many people, I see somebody commented rock star. Yes, culture fit being rock star. But one of the things that I've noticed a lot of Black introverts do is they apologize a lot. And I think that is one of the things that Black introverts specifically can do less of. So in emails, there's always sorry or adding but or just, or even on a meeting, like, oh, excuse me, sorry, just want to add. You don't have to apologize. Add your 2 cents in, feel confident about it. That is okay. So I think that's one thing that's really important. And also just speaking up for yourselves, not in a loud and boisterous way, but understanding that you have just as much say as anyone else on your team, and you deserve as much respect, whether or not you're loud or quiet, or if you decide to share your thoughts via, chat while you're on a team meeting, or you unmute and share out. It should all be considered the same. And that is a tip for managers and people leaders too, right? Always remind people that if they want to share some thoughts, via chat, or even if they want to email them ahead of time, that's fine too. During your meeting, as a manager, as a people leader, as an ally, you can say, hey, XYZ had this to share, read it out on their behalf, ask if anyone has any additional input. And that might actually help that person open up to share more thoughts as well. So there are a number of things that people can do, both to support themselves as introverts and then for people that are supporting introverts.
Exactly. One thing I like to advise my managers to do, especially when you're dealing with someone who is an introvert, because there's two types of processors, and we've talked about it here. You have external processors and internal processors, and external processors are the ones who like to talk it all out and like to kind of work through it by talking it out. Internal processors are the ones who I need to sit and think about it for a while, and then I'll come with something. So a way for a manager to work with both internal and external processors is, if you're going to have a meeting, send out the agenda and the objectives before the meeting. Give them 24 hours. So that way your internal processors can think about what they want to say. And then by the time they're in the meeting, they can offer what they've been thinking about.
Yes.
And then the external processors can process. Yes. But by doing that, again, you are being conscientious of all of the people in your space, and you're also giving people the chance and the agency to really be able to contribute in a way that is most comfortable and most confident for them.
Yes, an emphasis on send it out ahead of time.
24 hours, a whole day, my friend.
Oh my goodness. I'm like, I shared this tip with someone before and they were like, "Oh yeah, I just started sending it out just before the meeting." And I'm like, that's not enough time, right? What if folks are working on other things just before the meeting? I have a call just before the meeting, or I'm already brainstorming about something else. It's not enough time. And then I get there and you feel as though I'm not participating because you didn't give me enough time to actually process and come prepared. So that piece is, just want to drive that home. Give people some space, give people time. What else didn't we cover? Promotions, benefits, money, all that good stuff. Compensation, I think, is, in general, I think people really struggle with advocating for themselves there. And it becomes even more difficult if you tend to be more introverted. You may be a little hesitant to speak up for yourself. So just making sure you are finding the resources you need for that to happen, and making sure that you are being compensated as you should be. Especially now in this economy. Have y'all seen how much eggs cost? Like, you have to advocate for what you deserve, and other people aren't always going to do it for you. A lot of organizations are not running pay equity analyses on a regular basis, if at all. So people may not even know. And so it's important that you are just checking in and making sure you are being respected in that way.
Right. I also would advocate that this is a really good opportunity for those who are allies or want to be allies. And again, since a lot of my focus is on management, managers, this is a great time for you to step in. If you see that you have a report or a team member that is an introvert, it is up to you to then be their voice. Because if they're not going to do it for whatever reason that is, if they're not going to do it, then you advocate for them, because otherwise they will be left behind. And we have been told for years. I mean, I remember being told for years that if you just kept your head down and just do the work, then you'll get ahead. That is not true. That just is not true. But if you have those who also help to advocate for you, that will actually help you. And then that also does a good thing for the person who is doing the advocating, because then you're also they're a good scout of talent in addition to that. So it really is a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also on the manager front, just offering flexibility. And I know in some organizations that's not always possible, especially when you have orgs that have leadership teams for whatever reason that are demanding people come back into the office, right? And you may not have it within your power to offer alternate working schedules, but you still could think through ways that you can support them, right? Maybe that person needs a quiet working environment, so you help them block off one of the phone booths or meeting rooms, so they have a couple of hours each day when they're in the office to work, right? Or maybe you adapt their working hours. Maybe they come in earlier when there are fewer people in the office, or they're there later when people have gone home. So just consider different methods and approaches that you can take to still support that person, obviously keeping in mind the goals of your team and your business, which are imperative, because otherwise no one's getting paid. Right. So I wanted to share just a couple of the quotes and examples of introverts, because I think it's important to just kind of like, sometimes we talk about these things as very theoretical versus practical, and I think the practical comes when you have real examples from people.
Yeah.
So this is from that Black Introvert Week. This is one of the working guides, which I think is important to just kind of highlight, but a couple of quotes. It says, "Why don't you talk? You're so quiet." And this person says, "My demeanor is more laid back and quiet, and I'm a more private, reserved person. People are perplexed by me because I don't fit into their perception of how a Black woman should behave." Another says, "He never comes out with us. Why doesn't he speak up?" And the person says, "I'm a listener and observer. I'm reading the room, taking it all in as I process and really put thought into what I want to say. I'll keep thinking about this tonight and follow up with an email or stop by the CEO's office in the morning to share my views." And then the founder of Black Introvert Week in the US, now we got to do some research. I didn't even know we had one. This person's name is Jerry Bingham, said, "If we weren't wearing our hearts on our sleeves and aren't living our lives out loud, colleagues are unable to read us. So they wonder if we're engaged, if we're a team player, if we like them, and if we can be trusted."
Yeah.
Yeah. So much to unpack. So much.
Yeah.
Truly. But yeah, I think, this is one of many dimensions of neurodiversity to Black intersectionality that we've highlighted, and just something that we wanted to call attention to for people to consider. As always, we're trying to get Black people specifically, to advocate for themselves in the workplace, no matter who you are, what your background is, experiences are. If you were hired and you're there, that means you belong there, and that means you should expect the same fair treatment and respect that others are receiving. And then the other side, which is Caren's specialty, is really getting managers to think about supporting their people. Oh, that just made me think of, you know what, Caren, when we had the same manager, one of the tools that I loved that she introduced was the personal user manual. And I have used that tool in so many instances.
I use it I use it so often, it is almost obnoxious at this point.
Game changer, game changer. If you're not familiar, a personal user manual, much like if you had a manual for a product or like this microphone, right? It tells you how to use it. And so a personal user manual is essentially a guide in which you tell other people how you best like to communicate, how you like to give and receive feedback. What are some of your pet peeves? What grinds your gears in the workplace? What are your likes? What motivates you? So it's your user manual. It's not meant to take the place of someone having a conversation with you and getting to know you, right? It's just a supplement and sort of like a quick reference guide so people can better understand who you are. And I've found a lot of my clients love that tool, love it.
Yeah, it has been an absolute game changer to talk about that. And I think that the one thing that has made it even more of a game changer is it's such a good opportunity to clarify things for yourself. Because every time I ask someone to do a personal user manual, every single time I get, I didn't really realize that about myself.
Yep.
Or, oh yeah, that is something that's important to me. Yeah, it is.
Right?
It is.
Exactly. It's a great self-reflection tool as well. I often encourage people to revisit it at least, every 6 months or so, because you may find your working style changes. You may find the things that you like that motivate you change, which then in turn could impact your professional journey, your personal journey as well. So it's useful, even if you don't share it with anyone, to just kind of have your working style written down in one place for you to reference.
Yes. Yeah. And it's so important. And even kind of tying it back to the concept of being an introvert, being able to externalize the things that are important to you, and being able to externalize even something as simple as, it takes me a moment to process something.
Yeah.
Or to be able to externalize to your group, I'm not mad, I'm thinking. Yes. and to have those as things like, hey, this is the user manual. So if you see these things happen, know what this means.
Right.
So there are no misunderstandings. There are no inferences. There are no, well, I didn't know. I didn't know. Well, because we talked about it.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. Any final thoughts before we wrap up this week's session?
I don't think so. I think I'm so glad that we had this conversation, and I definitely now want to do some more research on Black Introverts Week. I'm super excited. I also want to find a larger community of Black introverts,
Yes.
which is a little bit of an oxymoron, but you know what? We'll work on it. I want to find a community of people who don't really do community. Let's do that. But yeah, this was like a really fun topic to talk about. It's something that had been kind of weighing on my heart for a little bit. So I'm glad we got a chance to chat about it.
Yeah. I feel like every time I'm like, oh, I don't have anything else to say, then I think of something. I just thought about how this correlates with the increase in social anxiety that people are having. And I can't say post pandemic because the pandemic is still very much here. But now that things have started to shift back into how they were before the pandemic hit, there is a lot of social anxiety amongst people. And so I think we're seeing more of that. We're seeing a lot more mental health issues. We're seeing that there are not enough mental health professionals to support mental health issues, especially for Black people. There are I've been exploring, I just told you the other day, I've been exploring this off and on for years now, the idea of becoming a psychologist, but now it's more at the forefront for me because I'm like, wow, there are really not that many. I think like 4% of the psychologists in the US are Black.
Yeah.
It's a very, very small number. And there are not enough people to support the sheer number of folks that need support. So just keeping that in mind, the importance of mental health, the importance of Black mental health, the fact that social anxiety is becoming more prevalent. And if it's something you're dealing with, you're not alone by any stretch of the imagination.
Not at all.
There are resources out there. And I think in lieu of, for people that don't have access to formal therapy, one of the things that the Black community has seen a shift in is community, right? Having people come together to have conversations. The church used to be a place where it served as therapy. It still does for a lot of people, but a lot fewer people go to church now than in the past. But having those community congregations have in the past been sources for group therapy for people, and we're lacking a lot of that. So just being mindful of that and figuring out how we can bring that back is something that's been top of mind for me. My friend in the chat, Mo on the Go, we've had conversations about this as well. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That creating that third space where it's not work, it's not home, but it is a place for you to gather and congregate and to be able to share community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. Well, we'll be back next week. I'm not sure what we're talking about, but it's still Black History Month. So it'll be some Black topic.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. If anyone has suggestions or things you want us to cover, please drop us a note and feel free to share this video. It'll pop up very shortly, I think, after the live. And yeah, we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Bye.
Bye.